London at the dawn of the 16th century. By a twist of fate, a teenage prince inherits the throne.
This pampered, resentful little boy, contemptuous towards women. All of these things are setting a really dangerous scene for somebody who then comes into a power unforeseen.
In a battle with the Pope, the notorious Henry VIII obliterates hundreds of monasteries and persecutes any who oppose him, plunging his country into chaos.
There are so many lives wrecked. It's estimated 30, 40, 50,000 people are up in arms against the king, and there are mass executions.
And in his maniacal pursuit of a male heir to continue the Tudor dynasty, no one is immune from losing their heads.
This golden boy, this glorious man of youth, this heroic, chivalric figure had turned into a paranoid, murderous monster.
But can medical science shed new light on Henry's rabid behavior?
Henry has a very bad jousting accident.
He might have had an injury to the frontal lobe of his brain from the repeated blows, which would have caused his personality to change.
Using groundbreaking AI imagery to revisit the world of Henry VIII, we separate the facts from the legend. Monarchs rise and fall, but what legacy will the sands of time leave behind? Henry VIII, is he no more than a product of the times, or truly a killer king? From a long line of English and Welsh nobility, the House of Tudor's most infamous son, Henry VIII, has fascinated and horrified us in equal measure.
It's estimated he may have killed upwards of about 70,000 people during his reign.
Burning, boiling, stretching, crushing, decapitating, all become the stuff of his legend.
You know, you can be hanged in Henry VIII's England if you steal goods worth more than a few pence, for example. Henry also makes witchcraft a felony for the first time, which means that many more witches are hanged or imprisoned during Henry's reign.
But are there more layers to this bloated, bloodthirsty, temperamental wife killer?
He was a polymath. He spoke several languages. All of those things are a sign of great mental acuity.
So who is the real Henry VIII? What is the true picture of this complex man and seismic monarch? Henry's story begins in southeast London.
Henry was born in 1491. He was the spare heir, so his parents had an elder son, Prince Arthur.
I think Henry's background really set the whole stage for what was to come. Henry VIII was never destined to be king.
Arthur, who was raised separately in his own household as Prince of Wales. Henry probably didn't really know Arthur that well. He won't have spent very much time with him.
His father, Henry VII, has big plans for brother Arthur when he inherits the throne. But Henry is pretty much an afterthought and needs to be kept out of the way.
Henry was sent to live with his sisters, and he really was the star of his household because Arthur wasn't there.
Now, what this meant was that he was brought up in a very female household. It meant, I think, that he was very pampered. He was somebody treated as terribly important, cosseted, and he was a prince and rather a beautiful young boy.
So I think you get a sense that he saw himself as possibly more important than he was.
Somebody who, in this rich female environment, became overly familiar with female attention, leading, I think, to no small degree of contempt towards women.
Henry might have enjoyed his pampered life in relative obscurity had fate not intervened.
His brother, Prince Arthur, dies suddenly of the sweating sickness, which is a uniquely Tudor illness that carries people off really within hours. Some sort of influenza, perhaps. And immediately, the future Henry VIII, who's only 10 years old, is promoted to heir to the throne. And I think you do get a sense that he starts to see it as his destiny. You know, this brother has cleared the way for him.
This is somebody who has been brought up in the shadow of Arthur, brought up with a festering resentment, feeling that he was less significant. And now here he is, given the chance to step into his shoes as the monarch.
On April the 21st, 1509, when his father dies of tuberculosis, Henry's star can truly shine as he becomes King of England to a tumult of public acclaim.
He comes to the throne when he's 17, and there is this anticipation. People are excited. He's young, he's good-looking, he's sporty.
He was so beautiful that ambassadors described him as having a face that would please a pretty woman. So we're talking about Hollywood actor, heartthrob, teen idol level beauty. He was 6'2". He could pull the Welsh longbow with his Welsh longbowmen. He could ride, he could hunt, he could joust.
Henry is so young and energetic that he can tire up to 10 horses a day.
He was athletic. He was all that a king should be.
There's brains behind the brawn too.
He could do engineering with his engineers. Not only was he smart, he was known to be able to hold his own debating luminaries like Erasmus and Thomas More.
The Dutch scholar Erasmus is widely celebrated as one of Europe's leading thinkers. Fellow intellectual Thomas More had tutored Henry as a child.
They praised Henry for his ability to logically work things out. He was considered this great hope. And people were still being influenced by an older sort of Greek belief that outward beauty would reflect inner beauty.
Barely weeks into his reign, Henry's under pressure to consider an heir to his throne.
One major factor for him in being king is to produce heirs for the Tudor dynasty, because they're not a very fecund family. He doesn't have any surviving brothers. His father doesn't have any surviving brothers either. So really the whole Tudor line rests on Henry.
He certainly has an eye for the ladies. Even his brother Arthur's widow is fair game.
Catherine of Aragon arrived from Spain in 1501 to marry Prince Arthur. That marriage obviously didn't last very long. He died, and she was almost immediately betrothed to the young Prince Henry because her parents didn't want to lose out on the dowry or the alliance. Catherine's mother, Isabel, the Queen of Castile, who's an independent sovereign in her own right, dies, which debases Catherine's worth. And the future Henry VIII is told to disavow his betrothal, to break his betrothal, but he does make a free choice to marry Catherine, and I think that's really key to their marriage.
It speaks of some degree of spite that he would take the widow of his brother. Henry will have experienced no small degree of malice in doing that.
It's not just the personal satisfaction of taking the bride meant for his brother. There's also a decent financial upside in it.
By the time he marries her, his father-in-law Ferdinand of Aragon has effectively taken over the whole of Spain. So Catherine does bring this alliance with Spain.
In a lavish ceremony at Westminster Abbey, Henry and Catherine are formally crowned King and Queen of England.
They immediately attempt to produce heirs to the Tudor throne, really to shore up the succession, but also to silence any claims that perhaps someone else has a better claim to the throne, or perhaps there should be a different dynasty on the throne.
Henry wants, above all else, a male heir. I think the degree to which he requires a male heir is more than simply to do with royal protocol and ascendancy. I think he has a real contempt towards women, even at this stage.
Barely a year into his reign, the teen king starts getting tough.
There are hints at times of some ruthlessness there. For example, he has Empson and Dudley, his father's two effectively closest servants, executed really just because he knows it will bring him popularity. He does it for likes, effectively. It is a sign that perhaps Henry VIII isn't necessarily going to be following the letter of the law, and they certainly are judicial murders by any modern reckoning.
The fledgling monarch has flexed his muscles. Are these flashes of teenage exuberance, or a harbinger of evil to come?
For somebody to have the emotional emptiness to be able to do this hints very strongly that we're looking at somebody who has a psychopathic tendency.
In the early years of his reign, Henry VIII wastes no time in cementing his reputation as a battle-hardy warrior. He personally leads a charge into northern France, capturing the towns of Tournai and Terouanne. Henry also imprisons high-ranking French nobility, to the delight of his subjects.
He would have been incredibly popular, a rock star of royalty.
He loves going to war. He does what kings traditionally do in England. They go and fight the French. And people quite liked him in general.
Whilst Henry is overseas, his Spanish queen holds the fort as regent. She repels an invasion by the King of Scotland, James IV, and victoriously claims his scalp in the Battle of Flodden. Catherine even sends her husband the King of Scots' bloody cloak as a souvenir. But back in the bedroom, all is not well. Still no sign of Henry's Tudor heir.
Catherine of Aragon's pain was unique in that she lost her babies at the end of her pregnancy. Sometimes they're recorded as stillbirths, sometimes they're recorded of having died shortly after birth. Almost half of all children were lost by the age of 5. It was a horrific time to have to be a parent.
At last, Queen Catherine has a child that survives the fragile first weeks of life, but King Henry is left wanting. It's a girl, Princess Mary. Henry talks to the Venetian ambassador after Mary's birth.
We are both young. If it was a daughter this time, by the grace of God, sons will follow.
And this is somebody who's very egocentric, who's very proud, who's very self-satisfied. So for somebody like Henry VIII, a male heir will have been an absolute obsession.
Despite Henry's hopes, no more children follow. And by 1522, Henry has grown tired of his queen's perceived failures. A new arrival at the royal court catches the king's wandering eye.
Anne Boleyn is a maid in Catherine of Aragon's household, and Henry is used to drawing his mistresses from amongst his wives' maids. Catherine of Aragon just closes her eyes and ignores it, and that's probably what he first wanted from Anne Boleyn. But unlike other women at the court, Anne goes, no, absolutely not. I'm not going to be your mistress. And we can follow the chart of their early relationship because Henry pursues her with love letters. He talks about being struck with the dart of love.
Let me know expressly your whole mind as to the love between us two. It is absolutely necessary for me to obtain this answer. I promise you that I will take you for my only mistress, casting off all others besides you out of my thoughts and affections, and serve you only. I beseech you to give an entire answer to this my rude letter, that I may know on what and how far I may depend. Written by the hand of him who would willingly remain yours, H.R.
The love-struck king stalks his mistress with 17 ardent letters over the next 2 years.
Mine own sweetheart, wishing myself, especially an evening, in my sweetheart's arms, whose pretty duckies I trust shortly to kiss. Written by the hand of him that was, is, and shall be yours by his own will, H.R.
He talks about wanting to fondle her pretty duckies, which is slang for breasts, so they've clearly got some level of physical relationship, but she's very much holding him at arm's length as much as she can. Eventually, He offers to make her his official mistress at court, so to give her an official role, and she says no, and then he offers her marriage.
But there's one big problem. Henry's already married and bound to one of the most powerful Catholic families in Europe. So Henry orders his Lord Chancellor, Cardinal Wolsey, to ask the Pope to annul their marriage.
Cardinal Wolsey had been the key figure in Henry's reign. He really runs the country, but he can't get Henry his annulment from Catherine of Aragon.
And Catherine has big backers who put pressure on Pope Clement VII.
The problem for Henry is her family in Spain. Her nephew is the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. He rules across Germany, he rules parts of Italy, he rules the whole of Spain, the Netherlands. He is the most powerful man in Europe at the time. The emperor was already incredibly offended that Henry would think about discarding his aunt, because surely it's an absolute honour to be married into the imperial royal family.
For the King's Chancellor, time is running out.
Anne Boleyn hates Wolsey. The feeling's mutual. He calls her a serpentine enemy, or the night crow. But they really dislike each other. Eventually, Wolsey is arrested on quite trumped-up charges.
England's most senior cleric is apprehended near York and accused of treason.
He's actually tied to his mule as he's brought south, so he's really clearly heading for the Tower of London. As he's brought south, he dies at Leicester. I think in many respects, Wolsey does escape what was coming to him. Undoubtedly, he would have been executed, and I think really no chance he could have survived that.
The following year, Henry brings in a new law making high treason punishable by boiling to death. The Tudor king is turning vengeful. But it's the battle to win Anne Boleyn's hand that will have a cataclysmic effect on his kingdom.
He can't get an annulment from the Pope. He attempts it for 6 long years. Eventually, he breaks the English church away from Rome. So he breaks the English church from the Pope. He says, the head of the church is me. I can give myself an annulment.
Henry declares himself supreme head of the Church of England. At a stroke, he completely changes Britain's status and destiny.
At this time, to go against the church in this way is hugely significant. The sense of superiority meets with that actual power that now sits in his hand, and we see someone who believes he is utterly autonomous, that he is utterly omnipotent. He is somebody who believes that he is above anything and everything, including the church.
In early 1533, the hell-bent Henry finally seals the deal.
He marries Anne Boleyn in January 1533, when she's already in the early stages of pregnancy, and that September she gives birth to a girl, which is a bit of a disaster for Anne and a bit of a disaster for Henry.
The infant Elizabeth would become the future Queen of England. But Anne hasn't produced the son that Henry craves.
She has at least 2 other pregnancies. She then doesn't produce a surviving child.
For now, the king's ire is directed towards Rome and the Pope. In 1535, he takes a wrecking ball to England's monasteries. In the coming years, 800 are destroyed, their possessions plundered by the crown. Those who won't swear allegiance to the new head of the church risk their lives.
He started solving all of his problems with an axe and a sword. On May 4th, 1535, he ordered the execution in a horrible, horrible way, a traitor's death, the hung, drawn, and quartered, for 4 Carthusian monks and a Brigittine monk.
He ordered that the hangman cut out their hearts while they were still alive. The sadism integral to this act is beyond comprehension. But more than that, following their deaths, Henry ordered that their heads were placed on spears as trophies to warn off any other possible dissenters.
But the Killer King doesn't stop there. the axe falls on his most trusted advisors.
Thomas More, he'd been Henry's Lord Chancellor, a real mentor in his youth. He wouldn't swear the oath of supremacy. He wouldn't say that the Anne Boleyn marriage was valid. And for that, Henry has him executed. Before that, Bishop Fisher of Rochester, who's a saintly figure, was also executed by Henry because he wouldn't agree to the annulment.
They refused to declare Henry the head of the church. They were maintaining their Catholicism, and that became unbearable to Henry. He just couldn't stand for anyone to disagree with him. It wasn't safe anymore to defy Henry.
The monarch is now raging against all around him. Even those closest to Henry are no longer safe. What has triggered this man who was once so popular as a king?
They were not used to the king behaving this way. It was so shocking. Overnight, he became a monster.
Now in his 40s, an angry and increasingly bellicose Henry VIII is flying off the handle.
Henry's mental profile was his ever-increasing paranoia and irritability. Before, when he was described as being patient and gentle in debate, that didn't happen anymore. There was a point where he was even threatening to kill his own fool in the court. He was not the person he had been.
What is at the root of this relentless rage and paranoia? The answer may lie in an incident recorded at Greenwich Palace.
Many historians have already speculated that Henry suffered a traumatic brain injury in January of 1536. He was knocked unconscious during a jousting match.
He's knocked out cold for quite some time.
His behavior changed so drastically after the jousting accident that there's widespread support that he would have had an injury to the frontal lobe of his brain, which would have caused his personality to change or caused his mental deterioration.
Henry's accident would have immediate ramifications on his relentless pursuit of a male heir. As the king was lying prone and unconscious from the accident, Anne's distress causes her to miscarry his baby son.
She blames her final miscarriage on the accident.
For Henry, it's the last straw.
The injury certainly causes him significant pain. It causes ongoing disablement. He'll never be the man that he was physically after the accident. So even if there isn't a head injury, and there may well be, actually the fact that every day he's in significant pain must have had an impact on his character.
Once the physical disabilities, the physical problems started to get their grip on him, I think this spoiled, psychopathic personality came to the fore and completely knocked away this civilized, intellectual persona. So we see Henry behaving in a much more unsophisticated, barbaric manner.
The king's fury is now directed towards his queen.
By that stage, Henry is tired of Anne. The relationship hasn't gone how he was hoping for. What he wants in a mistress isn't necessarily what he wants in a wife, and Anne is very fiery. By early 1536, he's involved with another maid-in-waiting, Jane Seymour, and really he decides he wants a new wife. Unlike Catherine of Aragon, Anne Boleyn doesn't have a powerful family. I mean, what are the Boleyns going to do about it if Henry decides to execute her? And so he does.
Anne is marched from Greenwich Palace to the infamous Tower of London.
She's arrested for adultery and incest with her brother George, and that would be treason in a queen. It's clearly trumped up charges, and in fact, people who didn't even like Anne don't tend to believe that she was guilty. But nonetheless, she's convicted, and then she's beheaded by sword on the 19th of May, 1536.
Less than 2 weeks later at Whitehall Palace, wedding bells. A heartless Henry marries his new flame, Jane Seymour, and crowns her queen after slaying the so-called love of his life.
The fact that Anne Boleyn does not provide a male heir for Henry VIII, sees him reacting violently against her. He needs somehow to restore the wound to his pride.
But can Henry's midlife crisis really be pinned on that one jousting accident months earlier? Or are there other factors at work?
It's not an excuse at all, because most people, of course, who've had a head injury do not then go around killing their nearest and dearest. That may well account for some personality change, although there are, of course, signs of difficulties earlier.
Medical anthropologist Kyra Kramer has been poring through the historical records of Henry's ailments. She also questions the accident theory.
In 1535, the year before his accident, that's when he started killing people like Bishop Fisher, like Thomas More, like anybody who disagreed with him. That change happened before. I agree with the historians thinking that his brain was injured, but I think it was from chronic traumatic encephalopathy rather than one singular incident.
Chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, is a brain condition linked to repeated blows to the head. Later in life, it can cause aggression and mood swings, something certainly seen in Henry.
You get repeated blows, little ones that cause little concussions or subconcussions, which eventually turn into a large bruise or bleed in the frontal lobe of the brain. That's where you keep your personality. He was an avid jouster. Now, when you joust, you're basically taking the force of a small car behind a stick and hitting someone in the head with it. We know he got hit in the head because in at least one incident, he forgot to have his visor down.
Proof of this head trauma is found in 1524 when a chronicler of the day describes a duel against the Duke of Suffolk.
His helpers didn't put down his visor, and he got hit in the face with splinters, which could have killed him, easily killed him. And everybody was waiting for this rage to happen, but he was still a young man. He immediately forgave not only the knight who hit him, but he forgave the squire who had failed to lower his visor. That is how even-tempered and logical and decent Henry VIII was before he turned 40. We know from incidents like that not only was he gentle-tempered, we know that he was getting hit in the head by sticks.
As the damaged brain ages, the symptoms of this illness take hold.
The athletes who have this, they've done things like suddenly kill their families. So when I say that CTE can cause a radical change in personality, it can cause a lethal change in personality.
And Kyra has come up with another theory that could also blow apart the accident hypothesis.
When we were first publishing our article in the Cambridge Historical Journal, we were trying to figure out a reason for Henry's personality to have changed so drastically from 1531 onward, his 40th birthday. He became more and more erratic, paranoid, until eventually he became the monster that everyone remembers. And when we were looking at illnesses that may have applied to this, one of the contenders that we thought was the strongest was something called McLeod syndrome.
McLeod syndrome, an unforgiving genetic disorder causing physical and psychiatric problems later in midlife. Could this have afflicted the Tudor bloodline? Could Henry have suffered from it?
On the patient's 40th birthday, no one knows why it is the 40th birthday that triggers it, their personality can change so drastically that a few patients have been misdiagnosed with schizophrenia. So we thought between that and the fact his health was progressively going downhill, as would happen with McLeod syndrome, we thought that it might be a very plausible answer.
Whatever the cause of the king's torment, just months after sending his wife to her death, Henry even surpasses himself. His religious reforms are causing a groundswell of discontent amongst his largely Catholic subjects.
In October 1536, a huge rebellion erupts against him. It starts at Louth in Lincolnshire, and a group of townspeople actually walk in procession behind their cross. And as they do, a rumour gets up that Henry is going to dissolve the parish churches.
Rebellion spreads like wildfire, leading to an insurgency, dubbed the Pilgrimage of Grace.
They ring their church bells in alarm, and within weeks, the whole of Lincolnshire and then the whole of Yorkshire are up in arms against Henry. It's an absolutely enormous rebellion. It's estimated 30, 40, 50,000 people are up in arms against the king, and he has an army of about 8,000 people at best that he's able to cobble together. So he negotiates with the rebels. He agrees with them that he will hold a parliament at York. He says, you can all go home, you'll be fine.
But a vengeful king has other plans in mind: to make the traitors pay.
These people have risen against the king, but they've then gone home on the basis that they'll receive pardons and they'll receive at least an assessment of what their demands were. Henry has no intention of doing anything, he said. He's furious with the rebels, and he's really just biding his time until he can kill them.
Following a rebellion in the north of his kingdom, a tyrannical Henry VIII is seething.
At the start of 1537, Henry suddenly acts against the rebels. He uses a smaller rebellion as a pretext to go against everyone who was involved in the earlier rebellion. He has Robert Aske, who's the rebels' leader, executed at York, which is the centre of his rebellion. And he also moves against many of the people who are just minor figures in the rebellion. There are mass executions.
Henry had more than 200 everyday people eradicated, obliterated, simply because they opposed his reforms. One of Henry's most horrific offences.
It really leaves a scar on the north of England that will take decades to heal.
This disproportionate level of violence is a key mark of a psychopath.
Back at Hampton Court Palace, barely months into his third marriage to Jane Seymour, the king seems to be getting itchy feet.
He frequently told other ambassadors or other members of the court, "Ooh, I see that pretty lady. I wish I'd seen her before I got married." He was waiting to see if she got pregnant. It would have been very easy to divorce the daughter of a minor country knight.
The threat of the axe looms large over Jane, until suddenly, a miracle.
She got pregnant and had a baby boy, and then magically became the love of his life.
To royal fanfare, Jane produces a healthy son and heir to the throne, Edward VI.
In Henry's eyes, she is the only valid wife, and I think that's purely because she provided the male heir.
12 days later, Jane suddenly dies from complications after childbirth. The grief-stricken king retreats into mourning. But within weeks, the search is on to find a fourth wife, with the help of his right-hand man.
Henry doesn't like to get his hands dirty. In fact, he tends to vanish if bad news is coming for somebody. He uses other people. And of course, when we think about Henry VIII's ministers, we think about Thomas Cromwell, who is undoubtedly his chief enforcer. Whatever Henry wants, Thomas Cromwell does it, including the arrest of Anne Boleyn. That's very much Thomas Cromwell's work.
Henry is on the hunt for a queen who can give him his second son. Cromwell looks to Central Europe, where they can forge a strategic alliance with the Protestant German states.
He arranges a fourth marriage for Henry with a German princess called Anne of Cleves. and it turns out to be an absolute disaster. Henry can't stand her. The feeling is probably mutual.
Nothing to report in the bedroom either.
They're unable to consummate the marriage, so there's no hope of a second son for Henry. And Henry is absolutely furious that Cromwell has got him into this situation.
The writing's on the wall for Cromwell. Or maybe not. It seems Henry has decided uncharacteristically on forgiveness.
He actually creates Thomas Cromwell Earl of Essex, which is a huge promotion for this low-born man. And it looks as though he's not too bothered about Thomas Cromwell's role in the Anne of Cleves debacle. And then suddenly, effectively, the axe swings. Cromwell goes to a council meeting one day and he's arrested. He's then taken to the Tower. He's ordered to help the king annul his marriage to Anne of Cleves, and then he gets beheaded for treason.
Unlike Cromwell, Anne of Cleves gets to keep her head, even though her marriage had lasted only 7 months.
Cromwell can't have seen this coming. I don't think anybody saw this coming. He is very, very loyal to Henry. And if you want an example of judicial murder, this really is it in Henry's reign.
Now approaching 50, the moods of the cantankerous and ailing king are increasingly erratic. Henry's high life doesn't help. His doctors implore him to cut down on the vast quantities of meats and fine wines that he gorges on. The once athletic monarch can now barely walk.
What I think is really key with Henry is that really for the last decade of his life, he's in constant pain, an agonising pain. He has an ulcer in his leg which won't close. There's no painkillers really that are effective in the Tudor period.
The fact that his ailments are all likely self-inflicted won't have occurred to the sybaritic monarch.
He was very, very fond of hunting. In the 1500s, you're going flat out over very rough terrain on horseback. You land heavily. So one of the things that could have done is jostle the long bones in his upper thighs. And they can send off teeny tiny little microscopic sized splinters of bone. And the splinters of bone work their way up through to the surfaces of skin, causing ulcers. In modern times, osteomyelitis, those are treated with a simple antibiotic or surgery if they really need to. Obviously, there were no antibiotics at the time.
So every morning he wakes up, he's going to be in agony, and I really think that shows in his personality.
He's moved from an entirely luxurious, pampered physical reality to one of suffering and pain. Moving from being adored for your physical beauty to one of repulsing other people. Henry would not have been able to keep pace with this psychologically.
Despite his age and ill health, Henry makes a beeline for his soon-to-be fifth wife.
Catherine Howard is a pretty young maid. She comes to court as a lady-in-waiting to Anne of Cleves and catches Henry's attention. She may be as young as 15 when she meets him in 1540. She's very, very young, much younger than him, and she's really sort of pushed in his direction when it becomes clear that the king is interested in her. And she is massively unsuitable to be queen. There's no doubt about it.
Catherine has a secret, scandalous history of which the king is completely unaware.
She has had previous relationships, although they begin so early in her childhood, actually, one when she's maybe around 13 years or so, that actually they look quite abusive in their nature. She's married to Henry VIII in 1540, and all goes well at first, but in 1541, word comes out that she's had these previous relationships during her childhood, when she was a very young child. It then comes out that she has been seeing Thomas Culpeper, a member of the king's household, in private with just Lady Rochford as her chaperone, and that looks very much like adultery.
By now, an unstable Henry is racked with paranoia. He sends his teen queen and her beau straight to the Tower.
Culpeper and also Francis Derham, who is her lover from her childhood, who obviously met Catherine Howard before she became queen, is also executed. And then Catherine Howard is executed without a trial. But actually, she's a teenager. Henry had grounds to send her back home. She looks very much like she's validly betrothed to Francis Derham, which means that her marriage to Henry VIII would have been invalid. It is undoubtedly vindictive, and it's undoubtedly murder to have killed Catherine Howard in 1542. Arguably, one of the worst things Henry VIII actually does.
But all is soon forgotten by the ruthless king. Barely a year later, once again, wedding bells.
His sixth marriage was famously to a widow, Catherine Parr, that didn't result in pregnancy.
A mature Catherine survives where many of Henry's wives do not, perhaps mellowing the mercurial and fractious king.
By that time, he had become so corpulent and in such ill health that it was very unlikely that he had consummated that marriage.
But Henry coins Catherine his sweetheart. She acts as regent during his final war against France in 1544. After promoting religious reform, Catherine even survives an attempt by the king's ministers to get her arrested and executed for heresy. Henry's final queen then nurses him through ill health until his death in January 1547.
A few years after his death, people were really reminiscing, thinking, wasn't it lovely when we lived under Henry VIII?
England enters a period of turmoil with a short succession of rulers. Henry's beloved male heir, Edward VI, lasts just 7 years on the throne until his death from tuberculosis at the age of 15. Despite his father leaving a legacy of debt from failed wars and his numerous executions and purges, Henry's subjects hark back to a golden era under his iron fist.
He was surprisingly popular among the peasantry, and that's quite surprising because you would imagine, the monstrous Henry VIII. But actually, people quite liked him in general. He's this larger-than-life figure. That said, it is quite a dark time to live, even among the lower levels of society.
With an estimated 70,000 deaths to his name, was Henry VIII a hard ruler at a time of bitter internal conflict and religious strife, or was he just plain bad? How will the sands of time treat this killer king's legacy?
I think it's arguable that Henry VIII is one of the people responsible for the most deaths in English history. Certainly no other English king ever responsible for executing 2 of their wives. When we look at his record of the killings during his reign, he is a serial killer, and I don't think it's going too far to say that.
My interpretation of Henry VIII is one of purely bad. He has a psychopathic potential disposition, that's clear. And it's a disposition that he chooses to fully express purely because he can in the acts of sadism that he commits in his later life that still shock us down the centuries later.
Obviously, you need to be able to think to know what you were doing is wrong. So the fact that Henry became more and more bloody and violent and paranoid and irrational, it would have been consistent with his brain deteriorating. So I think it would be unfair to call him a killer king. He was a good person who became a killer due to circumstances beyond his control.
Of course, Henry VIII was a monarch, so no one was ever going to bring him to account or bring him to trial. But today, if he was hauled before a tribunal, I think he would undoubtedly be charged with murder. I think it's highly likely he would be convicted.